Hello and welcome to the EDHRECast, where we're all about commander, data, and dad jokes. I'm Joey Schultz, and I'm joined by my pun-tastic co-hosts. Up first, he just told me, Joey, they put your name on a magic card, and then showed me the new card called Champion of the Weird. It's Matt Morgan.
So Joey, why is the highway afraid of the bike lane?
I couldn't possibly tell you. Why?
Because it's a cycle path.
Interesting. I feel like you're bringing a whole new meaning to life as a highway, Matthew.
This one definitely goes on and on and on.
On and on and on, indeed. All right. Up next, he saw the new card Sinister Gnarlbark and is now affectionately referring to it as Gnarls Barkley. It's Dana Roach.
I'm not sure if you two saw that they're adding Sir Mix-a-Lot to the Super Bowl halftime show next weekend. He likes big punts and he cannot lie.
If there's one person on this planet that I can trust to be super honest, it's got to be Sir Mix-a-Lot for sure.
Absolutely.
I mean, he is a big football fan. I mean, he loves to play the tush push, so makes sense.
So anyway, welcome to the EDHREC podcast, where we immediately send you right off the rails. All right, guys. In this episode, we're talking about cards that we want to ask, are these cards worth the hassle? Like, yeah, they're good, but also they do a couple of other things in the game that make you just a little bit weary, just a teensy bit exhausted. And we want to ask, is that exhaustion worth the power and the effects that they bring to the table? I guess, guys, where should we get started with this topic?
So, I mean, this topic kind of came to my mind originally when I was playing the card Propagator Drone in my Raga Draga deck. This is a card that, to me, just set up so many headaches for navigating how that is. And Propagator Drone, it came out in Modern Horizons 3, and it's a card that only goes in specific decks because it cares about tokens. So it's 1 and a green for an Eldrazi drone that's a 2/2, and says tokens you control have evolve, which is fine. Giving things evolve is cool, but then you can pay 3 and a green to make a 0/1 Eldrazi spawn token, and you can have it to sacrifice with the Eldrazi spawn type of abilities. Keeping track of all them at separate times is such a headache for me. Like I very much found myself playing this once and thought, I need to find a replacement because this is too much for me.
This token has 1 counter on it, and then this token has 2 counters on it. This token doesn't have any counters on it, so you can't put them all in a stack and be like, hey, here are my 7 tokens. You have to be like, no, here's this token that has 1 counter on it, and then here's this other token that has 2 counters on it, and then here are 2 that don't have any counters on it, but one of them has summoning sickness, and
yes, yeah,
like, cool card, but also I'm exhausted just talking about it, so I feel you.
I mean, that's kind of the Cathar's Crusade issue to a degree, right?
Yeah.
So many dice that you're like then playing with at that point, and it's undoubtedly a fantastic card. Like, there's so many decks where you drop a Cathar's Crusade and you take a game action, there's a good chance you're going to win the game because the amount of power that you are going to then put on the board by dropping 4 more tokens off something else, buffing all of your stuff, it's an excellent card. And it's also a massive headache because of the amount of bookkeeping it requires you to do. And frankly, the quote-unquote fixed version of it, which is Starlight Spectacular, which says when you attack, each creature gets subsequently bigger, doesn't even have you're not even using dice or counters to track that. You have to manually do it or use dice and hope they don't can be confused with the actual counters you have on things as well.
That's just it. When Starlight Spectacular came out, I remember you both being like, oh, this is so much easier to track than Cathar's Crusade. And I'm like, I prefer the Crusade, to be perfectly honest. Because like ordering them and then here's the marching orders and this one is +1, that +2. That felt like more of a headache to me. But then again, my relationship to Cathar's Crusade, and this is where that question comes in, is it worth the hassle? I think a lot of people will feel, it's a headache to keep track of a Cathar's Crusade in those decks where you play like one thing at a time and then everything has to adjust to different numbers. The deck that I was most commonly playing it in was my Thalisse deck, which makes like 5 bodies all at the same time, and then each one of them gets the same number of dice. So much easier to track. So in that case,
sure,
I felt it was completely worth the hassle. That actually was very easily justifiable for me. And there are 188,000 players out there, nearly 5% of decks that can play Cathar's Crusade are playing it, that feel the same way that I do with Cathar's Crusade. But the context really matters a lot here. So while it might feel worth it to me in the context of my tokens deck, I can totally see it causing those same Propagator Drone problems in other people's decks, like you were talking about earlier, Matt.
Yeah, all of these cards, this is a whole category of cards, whether it's Propagator Drone, Cathar's Crusade, another one in this category that I wanted to like way more, but was a hassle, Vidalian Wave Knight. also a headache and a half is the timing of all these. And last time that we talked about cards like this, we got a lot of comments about people saying like how they can batch their creatures together, how I'll make one column of creatures and these all have 1+1/+1 counter. That only works until you get to like 3 or 4 batches, because the battlefield still gets super crowded. So yes, there are shortcuts, there are ways to go around it, but like the real estate that it takes up on the battlefield still requires so much management. And I love all of these cards. Like I want Propagator Drone to be really good. I want Vidalian Wave Knight to be really good. But how many different batches you have to navigate, especially depending, like you said, Joey, I'm making 10 tokens all at once, so they all get that one thing, and that's all I need. Well, Vidalian Wave Knight's a little different, because whenever you draw a card, you're putting a counter on everything. Well, that means you have to start a new batch. And then you draw a card, you have to start a new batch. That gets to be a lot of a headache.
And for some folks out there, I think it probably would be worth it, like, because it is still powerful. That's a powerful effect if you're playing knights.
Yeah.
And it's not like we dislike complicated cards. There are a ton of powerful but complicated effects out there that are 100% worth it. Like, I mean, protection is a famously complicated mechanic that requires a whole mnemonic to remember what it all does. But it's so good to have a Mother of Runes on the field. Like, yeah, I'm going to use those types of effects. Protection is fantastic. But, you know, am I going to play a one-off banding card? No, I'm not going to do that. And will every card that we discuss in this episode be like banding? No, absolutely not. But there's this whole spectrum between vanilla cards with no abilities that are 0% complicated and the rules nightmares of cards like Chains of Mephistopheles and banding.
For sure.
Everyone's going to draw a line in a different place. In this episode, we're really just interested in trying to look closely at places within that spectrum to see what feels good and what doesn't, because it's just a healthy gaming habit to make sure that you're aware of all of the extra strings that are attached to your game pieces and to check in with yourself to make sure whether you like that type of mess or if you don't.
I know that you said Starlight Spectacular is harder to deal with. I'd rather have to deal with one Starlight Spectacular trigger than 50 Wave Knight triggers.
Wow.
Joey talked about how like he's making 5 things, so they're all getting, 5 counters.
Yeah.
And then you're probably killing 1 or 2 people or 3 people, shortly thereafter. So the amount of like added math you're adding to the game is over relatively quickly versus the one at a time situation where you're putting 1 counter on and the next turn you're doing it again, and like that's when it gets really annoying to have to deal with, for sure.
Well, guys, I feel like we probably can't get too far into this episode without addressing the elephant in the room known as day and night. And to be perfectly honest, also the initiative. I feel like those are so famous as examples of things that are just truly not worth the hassle of tracking day, night, have people cast spells or not cast spells. Is it daybound, nightbound? Like, what's going on there? As well as adding an extra whole dungeon, not just for you, but for every player that everyone now pays attention to. Like, those cards are so famous in their causing players to feel exhaustedness that a lot of people avoid them, even when the cards would individually be good in their decks, just to not have to have those extra tokens and that extra tracking and that extra mental labor that suddenly is invited into the game, so that they can focus on their own plays and not have to worry about all of that stuff.
See, Joey, I don't think day night is all that bad, actually, because I only ever play cards with day night when I'm playing arena, so it just does it for me and it's perfect.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, the advantage, I guess advantage isn't the right word, but the thing about day night is you almost never see it. It's not the kind of problem that you have to deal with most of the time. At least I very rarely see it. Versus the initiative is a thing that's out there in a whole lot of decks. And it, like you said, it adds this extra layer of mental labor. And to top it off, it adds it in the form of 4-point font on a card that's printed in black text on a dark silver background, right, that the person has that's upside down from you. So you're like, oh, I have no idea what's going on over there or what the next rooms are. And because there's like multiple options and multiple trees, you can't just, it's not like a planeswalker where you like look at like, oh, which Chandra is that? Oh, okay, that's this ability and that's that ability. Okay, I can kind of keep that in short-term memory. I never can with the dungeons. I'm like, look at it, I'm like, okay, you could do this, you could do that, you could do that. And that's just for the next room. The layer after that is a whole nother bunch of choices. And yeah, everything about the initiative is frustrating in that regard.
I think it's so fun when you have a dedicated dungeon and initiative deck. But you have to be willing to go all in. I can't abide with one-offs of these, which sucks because there are cards that are day-night or initiative that I think are really good. Like Seasoned Dungeoneer came in the Barakos Precon deck, which is a deck that I've kept and I really enjoy, but I took that one out. I'm like, I just can't be bothered with it. Even though the effect is really good, I just don't want to do that to my game. I just don't personally feel like that's the way to go. Or for day-night, I really like the card Avabruck Caretaker. Like, it's hexproof. It can give +1 counters out to stuff. And if you do flip it over, then it can give all of your other stuff hexproof too. That's a powerful card. I just cannot be bothered, though. I just can't. For me, it's just not worth the hassle.
Well, anytime you have variations, so you have a lot of different, just like slight tweaks on something, like you have the initiative, then you have venture into the dungeon. That also is a really weird, like specific interaction, just a tweak. I think that leads into something that makes it hard for me, especially when I was at the Lorwyn pre-release, where it's really hard to track different types of counters that go across from like card to card. I like, okay, well, this is a +1/+1 counter. Well, this is a hexproof counter. And then you start, you all these different counters that they just keep introducing throughout the game. That starts to add up. Like, this isn't a sponsored episode by Infinitokens by any means, but I can't play without Infinitokens anymore because of all the different tokens that we have to track these days.
And at least like +1 counters and -1 counters negate one another. So on the rare occasions that they interact, you're not having to like do that math live. But like you said, the hexproof counter or a trample counter or something is a whole different deal. And occasionally you will run into old cards from back in the day that put a +1/+0 counter on something. Or there's a couple creatures that put +2/+1 counters on things, or like all kinds of like erratic configurations for counters. Yeah. And that stuff doesn't get played that regularly, but like I've ran into it on occasion. Just trying to keep track of all that stuff is, just nightmare fuel unless you have some way to kind of use an Infinitoken or post a note or something to try to log it all through the course of the game.
Mm-hmm. The level of, I don't want to keep track of all these extra types of counters. For me, the Vivid lands, if I were to see them in a deck, I'm not going to bat an eye on it. Like, it comes in tapped. Vivid Crag or whatever will give you red, but it comes in with 2 counters on it. You can remove a counter to get any color. And if you're in a deck that proliferates, that's actually a pretty convenient form of mana fixing. Comes in tapped, not the best on the tempo, but at the same time, it's a pretty defensible version of a budget tapped land, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. And yet, I'm just like, no, I can't. And I've always felt that way. Even back when the first 2011 precons came out, I was just like, nope, yeet these out. I just don't want to deal with that. If I don't have to worry about it, I feel better when I'm playing the game. And that's kind of all that it comes down to.
There's all sorts of just random things, just any sort of counters that have like little slight tweaks. I'm like, man, give me a straightforward game.
The added challenge with land counters that I found too is because of where your lands are placed. First of all, you're turning them every turn by tapping them for mana. So like there's constant movement knocking those counters off, but they're right where your forearms rest on the table. Like any action you do with your hands, because your lands are at the bottom, I always am knocking counters off lands when I put counters on lands with my arms. Mm-hmm. So like there's a weird mechanical thing too with putting counters on lands that where it's at in the table just causes weird problems.
Dana, I don't recommend playing Earthbending in your case then.
Sure, yes, absolutely.
I mean, with the density of counters and tokens for that matter, I know that like I've seen some people talking about building, they're called bar decks, where you build them intentionally to have them played at a bar where like you have no additional counters, no tokens, anything like that. Like the card is the card and that's all it is. That idea sounds so much more tempting to me the more and more like sure. we get a new set and some weird thing that I have to track at all times gets introduced to the game. I love that kind of variant because it just simplifies everything when everything's getting way more complicated.
Matt, why do you think this year my mission in Magic has been to eliminate all shuffling from my decks?
Yeah, same thing. Yeah, absolutely.
Game is reaching a point of complexity that is really fun, really engaging, and for the most part, it's really enjoyable to keep up with that. But there are small little edges that I'm attempting to sand off, and shuffling is one of them that I want to experiment with this year. Just all that extra mess of, if you're looping a fetch land with a Crucible of Worlds out of your graveyard, say having an Oracle of Moldiah in play, which reveals the top card of your deck, and you may play lands off the top of your deck. Constantly having to check in between searches the top card of your deck and whether that's a land that you could play. I just don't like those pauses. That stopped being as much fun for me. So I'm eliminating a bunch of shuffling from my decks too, precisely for that quote bar deck type of reason. Just like, remove a couple of little things that are in small ways distractions that could over the course of the game add up.
Yeah.
A bunch of the other cards in my deck might be complicated. And I want to reserve that mental labor for the cards that I am personally feeling a lot more excited by. Not having to worry about that could allow you to focus on the stuff that matters.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's talk about some more things that we're not really sure are worth a hassle or not here in a little bit, but we got some quick shout outs that we need to do, and then we'll get right back at it.
We are excited to be teamed up with Dragon Shield again in 2026. We just got a preview of their new matte dual sleeves with a silver color on the inside and a whole bunch of colors on the outside. And being able to match your deck sleeves up with the vibe of your deck is really, really cool. Matt was just talking before we recorded about putting the silver and red ones on his Boros deck.
I mean, if you have the red background, silver interior, looks great for Boros. Or if you have a silver border commander too, always looks good, has that nice uniform look. These are actually super sharp. They're impressing me.
Yeah, we just got a preview of these and they'll be out February 14th, so here in just a couple weeks. Use promo code EDHREC in all lowercase at dragonshield.com to get 5% off your purchase. It helps the show and it helps the cards stay safe.
Yeah, and if you'd like to support the show in other ways besides subscribing, we know that most of you out there aren't subscribed on YouTube, so make sure to do that. We can see that. You're lying to yourself by saying you don't want to be subscribed to EDHRECast on YouTube. But also, if you would like to support us in other ways besides that, head over to patreon.com/EDHRECast, where it's just a nice way to support us and all the content we make while also getting something back in return for that. Whether you want to join our Discord community, you want to see all the historic challenge stats pick, there's all sorts of different things that we just want to give everybody a little thank you for supporting us over on Patreon, because truly, we just can't do this without Patreon support. And so if you like that, head over to patreon.com/EDHRECast for all the ways to get yourself a little something in return, including getting in the running for the patron shout out of the week. So this week, we're going to give a very special shout out to Pedro Sperry, who... I love your shoes. The Sperry's defined my college days. Everybody looks so good in those boat shoes. So thank you so much, Pedro, and the entire Sperry family for those fantastic loafers that everybody wore back in like 2012.
Wow. All right, guys, I have another category of card that I want to pose to you as, is this worth the hassle? Is this worth it? Is it not? And it basically, the category label here, not super scientific, but stuff that you constantly have to recount is kind of the oeuvre here for me. As an example, coat of arms. You constantly have to reassess, wait, how many elves are in play? And stuff like that. I mean, hopefully, for the most part, you just play a coat of arms, get a big buff, and you attack, and that should be game. You play it more like a sorcery than like an artifact, hopefully. But sometimes it doesn't always work that way. And if that is the case, and you constantly have to recount for everything, feels to me like it moves into the tedious section of stuff that I try to avoid. Or as another personal example, Cruel Somnophage is a card that I always look at and I'm like, I kind of want to play you. It can be used as an adventure to have target player mill 4 cards, but then it has the ability, its power and toughness are each equal to the number of creature cards in all graveyards. And as much as I love graveyards, constantly having to pull the table to be like, wait, how many creatures in your graveyards? After new stuff has died or other stuff has been milled, that constantly shifting number feels to me like it starts to move a little bit towards the, I kind of don't even want to bother. Where do y'all stand with those types of cards where you constantly have to reassess or recount or retrack things like that?
I mean, Coat of Arms absolutely is a card that has caused more slowdowns, because not only did we talk about cards that like you have to count for yourself with the Cathar's Crusade type of examples, but Coat of Arms affects everybody and it cares about everybody's stuff. And so Dana, I remember you and I were playing a game with DJ from Jumbo Commander over on YouTube, and he has a deck that is all about donating tokens to everybody. So you had a few tokens, I had a few tokens, the third and fourth people had other tokens, and they all matched up. So you happen to have like several things that had to count, but you also shared some other types. The example sounds really complicated because it was. We probably spent a third of the game time trying to figure out whose tokens were bigger because they had a different creature type that lined up, and it was such a mess. Coat of Arms is an overrun that just goes in every deck. That's how everybody should treat that card.
You play it the turn you're gonna win, and that's it. Do not play Coat of Arms. I mean, it's dangerous. Like, you can cost you the game if you play it at the wrong point in the game. But beyond that, you're just making so much work for everybody else that, yes, play it when you're going to end the game, or please don't play it.
Or preferably replace it with a banner of kinship, which only tracks your own creatures, your own stuff. Because, I mentioned, like, you want to play a coat of arms like it's a sorcery, but sometimes your combat gets thwarted or fogged, and then after that, that's when the tracking would have to happen. So timing alone isn't going to be a savior, and that's why I personally would prefer to play a banner of kinship if I wanted a creature type pump, personally. And I certainly don't think that coat of arms goes into every deck, but I mean, really, those were just some examples of like this oeuvre, this category of types of cards that have those elements of their numbers shifting around, which I think cause more of those moments of like potential pauses in games where everyone stops to count again and things like that. Another example of this could be Disa the Restless, the Lorgoyf making commander. And Lorgoyfs need you to track a bunch of different types of things in graveyards, and especially whether those things have left the graveyard and are changing the numbers around. That's not the kind of thing that is necessarily my jam, but Disa is a commander that thousands of people enjoy. She's rank 133, so she's clearly worth that effort to so many players out there. And that's why I'm curious about this type of category. Which types of things are worth the effort for you versus the things that maybe aren't? Are there any that are like stone cold off the table, or are there some that even if it's annoying, you're still going to make the effort? And is that connected to just like how powerful the card is, or if it makes you nostalgic? Are there any of those things that you guys do still play, or do you tend to avoid them? What do you think?
I've got a couple I still play when like the effect is good enough and worth dealing with the headache. So it's something that like, it isn't actually a deal breaker for me necessarily, but there are situations where if the card was borderline, I would not run it. That would be a situation where I'm like, that pushes it over the top between not running it.
Yeah, the only time I would play a star type of card where I have to constantly keep track of things is if that information is very easily obtainable, whether it's the number of creatures on the battlefield is how big this creature's power is, or it's the biggest mana value of the creature that I have. Something that is I can do in less than like 2 seconds. If it requires me to pick up my library and start counting that, I'm instantly out. Like, it's just not worth the headache and the slowdown and the pace of play that like I really don't enjoy that in my games.
Well, kind of connected to this, there's, again, me referencing old cards. There's old cards that care about your graveyard sequencing.
Yes.
It wants to know how many cards are above it, or it'll reanimate the top card of your graveyard if it's a creature or whatever. Not many of them, but like there's a few of them where that is relevant to the point where that's definitely a deal breaker. I have in the past, I had a deck that I was reanimating small creatures for effect, sacrificing them things that I could then bring back, blood gas, that kind of stuff. Nether Shadow is one of the ones that cares about the graveyard sequencing. It's an efficient creature to cast. It would work well in that deck. And I'm like, I'm not trying to keep track of how many cards may or may not be above this one in my graveyard. I'm just not going to deal with that. So that is definitely one, like, I am not going to play those things that care about that kind of thing.
See, this isn't quite near the example as what you're talking about, but Volrath Shapeshifter, speaking of old-timey cards, that card cares about what the top card of your graveyard is. And I wanted to put that in a deck, but then I found myself like half the cards in there were just trying to control the top card of my graveyard. Definitely not worth the hassle. And so, not quite as extreme, but even then, like, I wasn't trying to count it. I just had to look at the top card. And even that was like, well, but then I have to, manage that. And that's not more energy I want to devote that isn't on the battlefield.
Yeah, that's how I feel about Shallow Grave. I looked at that one and I'm like, oh, get the top creature of your graveyard into play for one turn. That could be interesting. And then I realized, wait, no, that effect is annoying. And then I also saw the price tag of the card and I was like, never mind anyway. So that's a level of tedium that is really good to point out, Dana. I would agree. Not going to be worth the hassle to constantly have to make sure that your graveyard stays in exactly the order, especially if other people want to, Diluvian Primordial, try and steal a spell from your graveyard or whatever. When other people start looking through your stuff, which is going to happen in a game.
Yes.
And you have to remind them, no, please keep it in the same order. That's so annoying. So yeah, I don't want to bother with that either.
And right now there's like 2 vintage Dredge players listening, being like, what is the problem? That is not a big deal at all.
I would say Joey said Shallow Grave is a hassle. I'm like, somebody's never played Tin Fins in Legacy before.
That is an accurate statement. I think one of the reasons why this type of topic is so interesting to me is because I find myself wanting kind of any reason to cut cards. Like just fully. I think that's really it. Like during the deck building process, there are 30, 50 cards waiting in my maybe board looking for a spot. So if I'm agonizing over what can I cut from this deck to make room, I think that these are the types of little things that my brain is like looking for desperately to be like, give me any reason to cut something. And minor nuisances can be the types of things that pile up into becoming a justification during the deck building process after I've been sitting there agonizing about what am I going to cut for 5 minutes, that I'm just like, screw it. This card's a little bit annoying, so I'll make the cut on that one to put something else in here. And that's just another thing that I'm kind of observing about myself during this conversation.
I didn't think of this one a second ago when we were talking about kind of the night and day, the initiative, those types of mechanics. But I have another mechanic that I refuse to play just because it is such a hassle. And I know a lot of players seem to still feel this way, even though it's been a few years since we've seen it. But mutate. Mutate can kick rocks. I don't want to deal with a mutate deck ever.
I know I have said this before, but I will say it again because my thoughts haven't changed. It's easier to kill the mutate player every game at the cost of anything else that happens than it is for me to learn how mutate works and figure out what's going on over there.
Wow, how do you guys really feel? For the record, I'm not a big fan of it either, but that's just really funny.
This isn't a commentary on like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Those are fine.
Are they?
The mutagen tokens that they're going to make, those are probably fine. But like the mutate mechanic, I just figuring out what is on the top and what's on the bottom, and then when you mutate again on top of that or on underneath it, whatever it is, like there's so many layers to mutate that I'm very glad we haven't revisited again, because just the way that they all interact with each other, especially if you like change zones, then it just becomes such a headache and a process to just replay everything out. And it's not my game, not my jib.
It also doesn't help that like a lot of the mutate stuff came from a set where it was all these giant creatures that the art kind of looks the same on it, and they all have names like Blander Splats, the Stank, and you're mutating on a
what?
A Somnoldirts. Remember, like it's all just nonsense mutate words being mutated under. Like the creatures are just a nightmare to keep track of. Everything about it, I just don't want to deal with.
At least, so this, I will never say this again, but the unset version, I think it was when we had it in not Unfinity, but Unreal or whatever it was. There was some unset that had a mutate style mechanic on it. It takes a lot for me to think that the unset version of this mechanic makes more sense.
Was it easier to keep track of than the actual?
Yeah, because it was only ever two creatures with the unset. Yeah. And so you always had like combine those two things that could mutate together, not any creature. And then you have a massive stack of 5 or 6 things that are apparently one creature somehow.
The host and augment mechanic that you're talking about from the unset, I thought was really, really compelling. And the mutate doesn't quite scratch the same itch for me. Then again, though, I could totally understand why a bunch of people would be like, no, mutate feels great for me, because some of those mutate effects are really powerful. Like Illuna decks and Nethroi decks, those mutation payoffs are really big. Nethroi brings so many creatures back from your graveyard. It's honestly really, really wild. So like some of those payoffs, I can see why for a lot of folks it's worth it. But no matter how many graveyard decks that I'm playing, I can't personally be too interested in Nethroi, because I'm like, knowing all of the rules, ins and outs of this mechanic is just that little bit of extra work that I don't want to do, and that I could play a different 7-drop reanimation effect instead.
See, I was sad that I took my Legolas deck apart until I realized I never have to cast Gem Razor again.
You know what, you had just mentioned unstuff a moment earlier, and I think a lot of like unset mechanics are actually really inventive. I really quite enjoyed the host and augment ability, but we cannot let this episode lapse without mentioning attractions and stickers real quick, as like possibly the biggest example of stuff that is just not worth it to care about. All of the extra rules and attachments to that. Like, not only can I not be bothered playing any of those in a deck, I don't even want to be bothered talking about them for much longer in this episode, you know?
So I have done more Reddit thread searching on how people figure out the name Goblin from Unfinity, because I've gotten into CDH and Alexios plays name Goblin because it's a good ritual effect. Everybody has a different answer for how they manage that card.
Wild.
Yeah, I know. I have nothing to add other than no.
But perfect. Yeah. Casting a counter spell on the topic. I enjoy that, Dana.
Yeah.
I actually see someone has written down here in our notes a card that I'm actually surprised we didn't get to until now. This feels like one of the examples we could have led with, possibly. A majestic nuisance known as telepathy.
I actually added it to the notes on the fly when we were talking earlier about like board states. Because if you think about it, I remember the first time I saw telepathy when I was first getting an EDH, I'm like, 1 mana to see everyone's hands all of the time, that's actually a really good effect. Like, I'm not joking. Telepathy, I think, is a very good card. And it's also just a pain in the butt.
Yep.
Because everyone has to have their hands up on the table, and it takes up board space and annoys everybody that half of their playmat's now gone with their hand. It's just oftentimes not worth just frustrating everyone by playing it, despite the fact that I think it's a very good card.
It's funny that you're mentioning telepathy, because just the other day, a coworker of ours was asking, is telepathy an okay card? I'm like, you're going to see what's in everybody's hands anyways. You're going to cast your spells. So just, I don't know, go for it. Like, I don't mind telepathy, I guess, because, yeah, you have to play with it, your hands down, but also, like, I don't know. It's just another zone, I guess. I mean, granted, I also did complain about, like, stacks and zones and everything with propagator drones, so I don't know.
This feels to me like one of those, like, suddenly your hand is taking up a lot more room, and then figuring out, what's on and what's not, and knowing, like, having that knowledge suddenly causes a lot of people to change the way that they were going to play. Once they know, oh, you do have this removal spell, that creates a lot more negotiation and pauses in play. That to me also feels like it's just that extra added bit of salt on top of this card that means it
turns every single turn into an episode of House of Cards where, like, everybody's negotiating every little detail. And
Sure. Yeah. Well, so speaking of telepathy, I'm reading Joey's mind right now, and I can tell he wants to go talk about challenge stats.
Goodness. Oh no. Are we bringing back the stealing of segues, Dana? Is 2026 going to be a year of traumatizing flashbacks for me? Because I'm not cool with that. No, let's just get to it. Yeah, let's just get to the challenge stats part and talk about the over and underplayed cards that exist out there in the data on EDHREC. Diabolical. Guess what? Our favorite deck builder, Archidekt, just released a really cool new feature, uploading custom cards. A lot of folks like to homebrew or invent cards for house rules or just test out their own game designs, and Archidekt now has a place where you can customize your own card, name, cost, types, text box, and put it right into your deck, where it will be treated just like any other card would. You can make a card that is totally blank or upload your very own custom image of your custom card. And yes, when you make your designs, not only will they count towards all of your deck's stats, such as tracking things like your mana curve, your pips, your types, to make sure that all of the stats of your deck are accurate, to make sure you're getting the very best deck information, but also all the designs that you invent or upload are usable in the Archidekt playtester, which is of course the very best playtester in the biz. What's really exciting is that this new feature has also laid the groundwork for Archidekt to support uploading alters of cards too, so if you want to upload your own custom images of pre-existing cards, the fine folks at Archidekt have even more stuff cooking, so let them know if that's something that you'd like to see in the future. Check out our deck lists at archidekt.com/EDHRECast to keep up with all of our brews and try making your own custom cards while you're at it. That's archidekt.com/EDHRECast.
I have a challenge this week for the card Power Matrix. It's a 4-mana artifact that you can tap to give a creature +1/+1, flying, first strike, and trample until the end of the turn. And it's only in about 3,000 decks in EDHREC. And obviously that's useful if you want to just give some kind of attacking creature you have evasion or let the damage punch through with trample. And there are advantages to not having that be on an enchantment or something, or have it be on an equipment that you'd have to re-equip if the creature dies, that kind of thing. But where I think it really shines and should see more play is in decks that run commanders with Death Touch that you're not really attacking with. Like, very rarely is Anhelo the Painter attacking, or Black Waltz #3, or Glarb Calamity's Augur. They all have Death Touch, and they're doing passive things to help your board, but they're not really swinging. And by having a Power Matrix available with those commanders, basically anything that swings at you, you can block it with a flying first strike Death Toucher to kill that creature. And again, you don't need to have that equipped. You can just have it sit there. You don't need to tap your creature to utilize it. It's just something that you have on demand. When something scary comes at you, you can kill it and take no damage, even if that thing has trample. It's not an amazing card, but like in those kind of really specific decks where you can both use it defensively to keep anyone from swinging at you with that Death Touch commander, and use it offensively if you need to punch damage through, that versatility is really, really good, I think, and it should see more play than the 3,000 decks it's in.
Wow. Card showing up in 0.05% of decks that can play it. I'm very intrigued by that. Heck yeah, Dana. Let's go on to our listener challenge this week. This one comes to us from Jimna, who wants to bring some attention to the underappreciated Prowling Geistcatcher, which is a black 4-mana 2/4 human rogue that says whenever you sacrifice another creature, exile it. If that creature was a token, you put a +1 counter onto the Prowling Geistcatcher, and when Prowling Geistcatcher leaves the battlefield, return each card exiled with it to the battlefield under your control. So we'll kind of hold your creatures off in reserve for you for them to then spill out once the Geistcatcher is off the field. Jimna points out that the reason that this is probably showing up in so few decks is most likely because it's a fairly obscure card from a precon that was not really supporting that card as well as maybe some other precons could have. It's in just about 9,000 decks total right now, about 0.24% of decks that can play it, and the precon that it came out in was the Wilhelt deck, a very famous deck, a very famous commander, but that deck is a lot more about zombies, so this human rogue was not really a perfect fit. That wasn't a great condition to make that card shine. But this card does shine. Like in black decks, wherever you're sacrificing stuff, this card will hold on to those creatures and then replay them for you, doubling your ability for your ETB effects or your death triggers. It's also especially good board protection. If someone tries to wipe the board, say even trying to exile your board, you can use a sacrifice outlet to sacrifice all of the creatures that you have, which will then hide within the Prowling Geistcatcher's ability. And then when the Geistcatcher itself leaves the field, all of your creatures will spill back out onto your board again. And then, of course, also in conjunction with some cards like Metamorphosis Fanatic, which could hide in the Geistcatcher's Pinata. When you then sacrifice the Geistcatcher, the Fanatic will come back, and that will trigger to bring a creature from your graveyard back into play, so you get the Geistcatcher back. And then you can create combo situations with this thing too, if you are in the mood to do combo. Like, this is a very versatile and very powerful card, which is pretty cool considering that it's only like 35 cents. But Jimna especially points out that an unusual place to try this one would be in the new Ashling the Limitless decks, which, of course, is a 5-color deck that has a lot of creatures that you're constantly sacrificing to those evoke plays. Geistcatcher is not an elemental itself, but doubling up the abilities of your elementals seems like pretty good insurance for a deck that cares about getting that much value out of your creatures. It's currently only in 8 of the Ashling decks out there so far, but hey, give it a look if you are building that deck right now, and especially give it a look in your other black sacrifice decks too, because it's a very powerful ability.
Well, I'll wrap us up then with my challenge this week. And so my challenge actually comes from like the best visual in Magic the Gathering that you can ever imagine. So who wants to imagine Wolverine riding a Shoopuf? Because that's what this challenge is talking about. Wolverine, the best there is. That's the Marvel X-Men Secret Lair commander. It's Gruul color, so 1, a red and a green for a 2/2 that has double all damage Wolverine would deal. At the beginning of each end step, if Wolverine dealt damage to another creature this turn, you put a +1/+1 counter on him. Then you can pay 1 and a green to regenerate him. So I recently was shellacked at my Lorwyn pre-release by a Wolverine deck. And the card that just blew me away with how good it was, and I'm surprised isn't being played more, is Ride the Shoopuf. So it's 1 and a green for an enchantment that says when a land would enter, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. Then you can pay 7 mana to have it become a 7/7 in addition to its other types. So backup plan in case you need a beater later on in the game. But the player was talking about, well, I don't really have money for a Bristly Bill or a Scythe Cat Cub. So there's a lot of just super powerful +1/+1 counter cards out there, but if you need a budget version for all those, Ride the Shoopuf is actually just fantastic. It still gets you all the +1/+1 counters you need. It's still, if you're playing a landfall deck, for example, it's still doing what you want with, okay, land happens, I'm going to beef up my, biggest creature out there and make sure I can still win the game. Ride the Shoopuf has surprised me actually, just for being super powerful uncommons that just we kind of forget about. If you need something that is going to beef up your team because you just play lands, that's just what you do in a game of Commander. You're putting lands on the battlefield. If you have a powerful creature you want to be souping up even more, Ride the Shoopuf is a fantastic budget version of Bristly Bill or all these other super powerful +1/+1 counter cards. And that is kind of what the typical Wolverine deck is doing. You see, it's got 9,000 decks to its name, and a lot of them are +1/+1 counter themed. So if you need a budget version of a card that's just going to make sure Wolverine gets huge, put him on a Shoopuf. Let him enjoy the ride. It'll be super fun for everybody to visualize too. So Ride the Shoopuf and Wolverine decks, everybody. Check it out.
And Challenge of Stats has been brought to you by Cardsphere, the best way to turn cards you're not playing for decks you're not using into cards you'll be playing for decks you are using. And I can't stress this enough. I've talked about it before, but the rate in which I'm getting cards I put on my Cardsphere list is kind of mind-blowing. And week by week, it's making me buy less cards from places online because I'm just going to get them as fast from Cardsphere as I would ordering them somewhere else. If you haven't signed on and started using Cardsphere yet, you absolutely should. It's getting better by the week. The cards are coming faster by the week. I can't stress enough how great this service is.
Heck yeah.
And you can do the same. Just go to cardsphere.com/EDHRECast to get started today.
Moving through some other things that make you ask, is this worth the hassle? We've named a couple of big examples, but I want to get into a couple of nitty-gritty ones as well. And one that I keep going back and forth on is start your engines and the max speed mechanic. I feel as though when I look at this ability, if you have no speed, you start at speed 1, and then once on each of your turns when an opponent loses life, you can go up to 4 speed, and when you hit that maximum speed, you'll get some extra benefits from your cards. I feel like I look at that token, that max speed token, and I immediately associate it with day and night and stuff like that, and have just like knee-jerk reaction to like, no, don't. But is it actually that big of a deal, a big of a problem? Like, I have a weird aversion to this that I don't even think is necessarily justifiable, but I'm wondering if I'm alone in that or not.
It's definitely the kind of thing where, like, so what I've done with it the couple of times I've been running it myself is just put the counters for max speed on the creature, like just use the dice to track what speed I am at on the creature or the land or whatever it winds up being. The advantage max speed has is it's only you. Like, you're not impacting other people, and I guess they might want to know when you're going to hit max speed for the effect, but they can see that really easily too. I think that one is less of a problem because you're not making other folks do extra work, and the amount of work you're doing is relatively minimal. So that one I have much less of an issue with.
So max speed I kind of treat like the ring tempts you, where it's you have all the abilities, yes, but especially with max speed, you only need to track it until you get to max speed. Then once you're there, you just stay there. So you don't need to worry about tracking it anymore. So you just kind of know, okay, I'm at max speed for the rest of the game. And you kind of make a mental note of all the cards that deal with your speed. You're able to know, okay, I'm at max speed. I get the max benefit. We're good to go. So I don't mind it so much compared to a lot of the other mechanics that you just kind of always have to keep track of, because at least max speed, like, there's an endpoint for when you care about it. Once you're done, you're done. You can just assume it's kind of like Ascend, where you need the city's blessing.
Yeah.
Once you get it, you have it for the rest of the game, so you don't need to worry about tracking it more because you already know it's there.
That's just it. I look at like the speed demon, and I'm just like, oh, this is a pretty decent demon that would draw me extra cards. Why do I have this aversion to that? And it doesn't really make sense. And honestly, the Ring Tempts You is a really good comparison, because that's one that I do actively avoid and that I don't think is worth the hassle as one-offs in my deck.
Fair.
I like the Fiery Inscription card a lot as another potential gutter snipe ability, but the fact that it says Ring Tempts You on it, I'm just like, I don't want to deal with the one-off effect of it. Even if it's pretty innocent, I'm just like, I won't be bothered. I'll find a different thing instead. But speed feels like a much less egregious in my head for some reason.
See, my aversion to max speed more is the payoffs just not being worth it than the mechanic itself not being a good one. So that's probably where my brain goes to. Like, I don't play any max speed cards because they're just not worth it.
I agree with that part for sure. But I would say, yeah, it's definitely closer to the Ascend City's Blessing side of the spectrum, where it's pretty easy to deal with the minimal downsides than it is to the, say, Initiative or Mutate side, where like the amount of work for me is just not worth dealing with.
A pattern I'm kind of noticing about myself, about what it is that I favor and what things I shy away from, is whether it just takes a long time for the thing to resolve. Like, Hawkball of the Surging Soul is such a powerful commander. That's the Simic Merfolk that makes all of your Merfolk explore. He's ranked 25. There are 22,000 decks in the EDHREC database for Hawkball. And I personally am just so uninterested in violating one, because resolving each individual explore trigger for just moving to combat and whether or not these creatures get a +1 counter or not, I just personally zone out. It's just not where my interest lies. It's kind of for the same reason I don't play Path of Discovery in any of my decks either. Like, I believe anyone who says that card is super good and super worth it, but for me, it feels a little bit like the Propagator Drone example. And similarly, resolving like a Clone Legion, the 9 mana, you get a token copy of every creature that target player controls. That's a spell that I've used before, and it is so powerful. And yet, I just don't like it. Keeping track of each copy and which one is which, or like drawing each of them on a token or whatever, like, that just feels more like a chore to me than an enjoyable game moment, even though it's so fantastic. So those cards can be really powerful, but they're the types of things that I just find myself less interested in. And anytime I've cast a Clone Legion, I've taken it out of that deck because I'm like, oh, right. Turns out I don't necessarily enjoy this. And I just personally want to make sure that I'm focusing on the cards that I enjoy. Yeah. For me, the extra value that I could get from a card like that is being weighed against the idea of doing something very simple and then passing the turn and not taking up a whole lot of the chess clock, because that might make a different impression on all of my opponents, negotiating around the way that the table perceives you. Those are the kinds of things that run through my head sometimes.
So I have a friend who has a River Song deck, and the trick with River Song is you are drawing from the bottom of your library. And I believe Joey you know someone who has one of these decks as well.
Indeed.
In your friend's case, they actually have a setup specifically to play this deck, right?
Yeah, literally a whole apparatus to make it easy to draw from the bottom of the library, because otherwise, picking up the deck every time you untap, upkeep, draw step, it's a little bit tedious.
My friend doesn't do that. My friend Kyle, he just usually like writes on an invent token or something, bottom of the library, like has some kind of a note he just puts on top to keep from the muscle memory reaching to draw off the top. But yeah, it definitely like shakes up the way that you have to play and the things that you have to do. And on top of that, then you're adding in it's a deck that, because of how River Song works, you often want to force people to scry or surveil or search their own library to get the damage triggers on them. So not only is it causing issues for you to manage, you're making other folks have to do more shuffling and searching.
Right.
So you guys are talking about this River Song deck. I'm reading it for the first time now because I didn't even know it was an actual card. I genuinely had no idea.
It's a cool one. I want to put that into the 99 of one of my decks, and yet I look at it and I'm just like, and I just have that reaction. And I still think that it's actually pretty interesting. And yet I know that to do so constitutes a commitment.
Yes.
And that's not a thing that I can be committed to right now.
Well, why don't we move on to actually real cards then? Because I still don't think this River Song is an actual thing.
Wow.
So one thing that I found myself, especially in the days when everybody was playing over webcam, but still applies a little bit today, but there's still certain types of theft effects that I find myself getting rather tedious about. Like, I know that I got to play some webcam games on some gameplay streams or on Elder Dragon Hijinks with our friends Olivia and A-Lead over there. And one deck that I know I just never can play is my Council of Four deck, because there are a fair amount of theft effects. So when you're playing over webcam, it just is actively impossible to do those things.
There are some things in games that like just don't work logistically over webcam. That's one of them. But even in person, they can cause problems. And I will use a real world example. I have a card in a sleeve right now in my quiver that was forgot at my LGS 2 days ago in games I was playing because someone had taken it.
Yeah, that too.
It was the last game of the night, and the person who got knocked out of the game, and they packed their stuff up, said their goodbyes and left one card behind that someone had taken control of and it was sitting there. Now it's a person I know, so like I will give it back to them next week. Not a big deal. I already texted them about it, but yeah, that kind of thing happens all the time with theft effects.
Yeah, you have to be so careful. It's not even just about navigating them in-game, because in-game, you do have to be aware of like, oh, if the person from whom I stole this card dies, then I will lose these cards. And that's like a slight extra hassle that I still think is like worth it to get a really cool card that you stole from them. Yeah. That's still powerful enough. I'm like, yeah, that's justifiable. But the outside of the game effect of if I mess up the returning after the game, that's devastating. That's really, really sucky. And that's a lot of extra sort of Damocles to have over your head at the cost of playing some of these cards in your deck, which sucks because some of them are really good. I think like Thieving Amalgam, for instance, which manifests cards from your opponent's library every turn. Like, I actually think that's a really powerful card, but I'm always too hesitant to play it because of what it could mean for the end of the game if I mess up in not giving people their stuff back, and I'm just too nervous to play it.
Well, if you want to talk about valuing your real estate on the battlefield, there's 4 battlefields out there, but if you put all 4 battlefields onto one person's battlefield, that gets really dense really fast, and I don't want to deal with that. I've tried to stick to, if I'm doing theft type of effects, I want them to be temporary, so we don't even need to, unless it's fun for the moment, swap cards across battlefields. Like cards like Reigns of Power, I think are very fun ways to do theft.
Well, I have one deck that's running Insurrection, and there's definitely been multiple occasions when the board state has been complicated enough when I've cast Insurrection where I've said, I'm just attacking you with your own creatures.
Sure.
To avoid not have to take everyone's creatures over on the side of the board and then figure out what's going where. I'm just going to be like, I don't think I can kill anybody anyway, so I'm just going to hit you with your own thing, so we don't have to move anything, and we'll move on with the rest of my turn.
Yeah.
Because the nightmarish board state that can create is just not worth dealing with sometimes.
I mean, on Theft, Doughty Voidwalker is one that I think Murph from the Command Zone has called out before. Apologies if I'm misremembering who it was there. But yeah, that is a card that does a little bit of graveyard hate. It takes other people's stuff if it would hit the yard from anywhere and keeps it in reserve with a shadow counter on it. But yeah, I believe I remember him saying he doesn't want to use that one, despite how powerful it is, because you have to keep that stuff with a shadow counter on it, separate pile from exile, and you have to track that for the rest of the game in case you revive the Doughty Voidwalker again, and you want to use that ability again, and also how it interacts when there are multiple people that have this in play. And this card is so good. It's in like 250,000 decks. Almost 7% of decks that can play it are doing so, because it is just that fantastic.
Yeah.
But it was just like all these little moments of extra tracking that made him go, I think this straw has broken the camel's back and he doesn't play it. And like, yeah, I can understand that. Like, I can understand why 250,000 people are playing it, and I can understand why some people would rather not.
Also, when playing other people's spells, like in Gonti decks or things along that line, you have situations where sometimes it's play, sometimes it's cast, sometimes the card is exiled face down, sometimes it's exiled face up. Sometimes you can use mana of any color. Sometimes you have to use your own mana. Sometimes it can be cast for free if certain conditions are met. I have a friend with a Gonti deck, and he actually keeps like a little, like, to shout out Infinite Tokens again, he has multiple stacks in front of him where he's like, until end of turn, until end of next turn, any color, face, like, but like oftentimes he winds up with multiple, like 5 stacks in front of him with slightly different rules variants depending on which card was taken by which effect. I wouldn't do that. Like that would be a deal breaker for me. I wouldn't want to go through that hassle. He's clearly willing to do it, and that's fine. But that kind of thing, yeah, it would be a deal breaker for me for sure.
Again, if he comes into Dana's situation where you forget to give your friend their card back, that creates a really bad moment afterwards too.
For y'all dedicated Theft players out there, your Laughing Jasper players and your Gonti players out there, I commend you for the tremendous task of responsibility of making sure that everyone gets their stuff back afterwards. It's admirable that you're doing it right. Kudos. If it's cool with you guys, I had one more example here. All-Seeing Arbiter has been lingering in the back of my mind this episode. This is one that actually Tomer played against me on a budget episode of Shuffle Up and Play, and I do think it's actually a very good card, and budget's a great reason to play it. All-Seeing Arbiter is a 6-mana 5/4 avatar with flying in blue. Whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks, you draw 2 cards and then discard a card, and it says whenever you discard a card, target creature an opponent controls gets -X/-0 until your next turn, where X is the number of different mana values among cards in your graveyard. I think there's a compounding effect of this particular example. First, that you have to track so many different mana values in your graveyard, which would be fine enough. But then also that's tied to a memory issue, that those creatures will keep the reduction until your next turn, even if the Arbiter leaves. I think there are a couple of things that this card has going for it, that any one of them on their own wouldn't be an issue, but when there are 2 or 3 of them in a single card, that's what makes me start to veer away.
Yeah.
A card that I do think is actually compelling, and Tomer used it to great effect in that episode. But it's just one other example I wanted to observe. I mean, we were all in that episode playing budget decks, and that's definitely going to be the kind of thing that affects where I draw my line in different places for sure. You know, I'll abide by a couple of cards that ask me to remember stuff if it means that I'm not spending $10 on a piece of cardboard. Not every single thing needs to be a deal breaker in those ways for a great big variety of reasons. So, this episode is not us saying these are not worth the hassle, just about looking critically at where it is that we've each drawn our lines. And this is one of those that stands out as a card that is hard for me to place definitively at any area of the spectrum.
So one I have ran into that causes issues is differing ruling on very similar or the same effects. So if anyone didn't see, Joey and I were on an episode of Extra Turns recently. And one of the things we had to do for Extra Turns to prep for it was make sure we had physical copies of all of the tokens that were going to be produced by our decks. Mm-hmm. And I was shocked. I was not playing a token deck, and I was still shocked how many different variants of tokens I had to have available for me with that deck that I was not prepared for until I actually went through and looked at it.
Sure.
Tricky to keep track of. I talked about a Katara deck I built recently that's running a bunch of living weapon variants. Once upon a time, they were all 0/0 germs. And then we got the 4 Mirrodin version of that are 2/2 Rebels, I believe. And then the version from Final Fantasy are 1/1 heroes. So that's 3 different things so far. And like, I would imagine we will continue to get variants on that over the years, whether it's a one-off thing in a set or like a sub-mechanic. And that deck's just going to get more complicated for me to keep track of which particular token is underneath those equipment when they come into play.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it is just like the hassle in the deck building stage, not even in gameplay. Like, I only have so much room in my deck box. Why do I need 31 different flavors of tokens? What am I, Baskin Robbins? How do we feel about Wheel of Misfortune?
Get it out of here.
The card that is like famously very confusing to a lot of folks. You play a mini game to see whether or not you're going to wheel your hand.
Joey, we don't have enough time in the podcast to explain how Wheel of Misfortune works.
I think Wheel of Misfortune is thrilled Magimathix is going to get printed to take away the
if you play
some of
that
the stigma attached to it.
If you play that mathematics card against me, I'm going to slash your tires.
For folks who don't know the Mathematics card, that is a new one that's been previewed from Strixhaven. It is XX blue sorcery. Target player draws 2 to the Xth power of cards. And thankfully, it has flavor text on it reminding you that, hey, if your XX cost is 2, that will let you draw 4 cards and stuff like that. But yeah, not the kind of card that I personally am going to put into a whole bunch of my decks. I feel like I don't mind a Wheel of Misfortune. The minigame to me comes off as fun, but it's one of those cards that requires probably that repeated exposure to it in order to like finally get into what this minigame actually is. The first time that you see it, it's just like so daunting that I can't blame people for having made that Wheel of Misfortune into practically a meme.
I think if there's some sort of minigame, just in general, because I have a friend who loves playing minigame type of commanders. I know that one of his favorite commanders is... his favorite deck is Círdan, the shipwright, which turns into a minigame every combat. Mm-hmm. There's all sorts of decks out there that just... It's really, really wild to see all these things. But you have to make sure you get clearance from your team first before you jump into, hey, I'm playing this mini game every single turn. Like, that's an opt-in type of moment for me.
I think it depends what the mini game is too, whether or not it's annoying or not. Like Council's Judgment is one of my favorite cards of all time. I love that card, and the mini game on it, I think, isn't problematic. It's over pretty quickly. You only see it once a turn anyways, but I do find it fun to like see what choices people will make. It's an enjoyable little 30-second distraction in the middle of a game. But if there was, 15 cards in a deck doing that, I think it would be way less enjoyable to do.
I understand that, Dana. That's kind of what's kept me from ever building a Warnog deck, which is the black-white 2 mana. Every time it enters or leaves the battlefield, everyone else can either lose a life or investigate, but you'll investigate that many times +1. So then repeatedly blinking and reviving him is like really powerful. It means you get a whole bunch of clue tokens, but that also would mean that you would end up playing that minigame like 8 times per round, which is cool for some folks, but for me, it just ends up being a smidgen beyond what would make me happy. So yeah, I'm always pleased by the one-off minigames, Wheel of Misfortune included, but when it is repeated like that, it begins to feel like a distraction to me in the same way that like tracking day and night is a distraction. Probably just my own taste in tea, but yeah, I'm always super pleased by those one-off minigames though. And I just mean for like when I am piloting a deck. I don't at all mean playing against a deck like this. I've enjoyed every Warnog deck that I've ever played against, and every Círdan deck that I've played against too, for that matter. If you've got one, bring it on. Can't wait. Any other examples come to mind, you guys?
No.
It doesn't stop me from playing them, but as an interesting note, I have a deck with Compost in it, which is whenever a black card is put into someone's graveyard, you draw a card. Mm-hmm. And there was a point in time a couple months back where I actually didn't cast Compost because I had to run to the bathroom, and I wanted to pass my turn and run to the bathroom quick and come back. And I'm like, I don't want to have everyone have to keep track of what my went in their graveyard. I'm just going to do something else this turn, take my bathroom break, come back and cast Compost the following turn. Mm-hmm. So that's a situation where like how that card played didn't stop me from playing it. I didn't take it out of the deck. I still think it's a fun card and like it in the deck, but it impacted how I was going to play it because I'm like, I am not going to make everyone keep track of this while I'm gone to the bathroom. I'm just going to wait a turn and play it when I get back.
Nice. And I'm glad you do still play Compost because that card rocks. Definitely a good example of a card that is worth it, even with the hassles.
Sure, yeah.
Plenty of them are worth that, but they do invite a new dynamic upon the game that I find is like at the very least worth acknowledging to make sure that you don't rush out to go and get a card that it turns out you yourself are a little bit annoyed by when you play. Because if you're a little bit annoyed by your cards, that slowly erodes your willingness to play those decks over time, right? Mm-hmm. I want to make sure that I'm focusing on cards that make me excited every time that I see them, that are good, but also that are pretty straightforward and allow me to focus on the game actions that I want to take and that will bring me and hopefully the whole table a bunch of smiles as well. So those are just the small things that I think can be worth it to keep in mind and to pay attention to what makes it into your deck and whether it is making you frown just a little bit or if it's making you smile just a little bit, you know?
I think that's a good bow on the whole thing, actually.
Oh, fantastic. I'm curious to hear from other folks out there about what cards they think are worth the hassle. And especially, folks, let us know what cards you think are not worth the hassle of putting them into your deck for whatever reason, for whatever effect they have on the game. But with that, guys, I guess we'll call it to a close. If listeners want to find you online, where is it that they can ask you about more Magic stuff?
So you can find me on pretty much any social media platform, Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, whatever, at Mathimus55. It's the same everywhere. And don't forget, we are proud to work together with Dragon Shield. Whether you want to get the new matte dual sleeves, whether you're still jonesing for some of those Landfall series sleeves, they are amazing. Use code EDHREC when you head over to dragonshield.com. It'll get you 5% off, and it lets you know that we sent you over there too.
You can find me online at Dana Roach. I'm writing articles for EDHREC and doing some short-form media posts for Archidekt on Instagram. And you can find all of us together at patreon.com/EDHRECast.
And you can find me everywhere online, from Instagram to Blue Sky, at Joseph M. Schultz. And you can find the cast online everywhere at EDHRECast. Everyone will be back at you next week with more data and insights. But until then, remember, EDHREC your deck before you wreck your deck.